Welcome to episode 11, where we're going to talk about Copilot at scale from activation to ROI. I'm Andrew Brower, and today we're digging into something that's top of mind for just about every organization right now as they go through their Copilot journey. So this isn't really a conversation on whether you should use it. That decision has probably already been made by your company. The real question is, how do you actually scale from your initial adoption and actually prove its value? And Kaitlynn here is going to take us through what that looks like. I think she's got some demos to kind of show how you can measure these ROIs coming down. So thank you, Kaitlynn, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm really excited to get into this. This is where so many organizations are sitting here right now. And I'm a senior adoption consultant with the Modern Work team, so I spend a lot of time getting people up and running with Copilot, but then really trying to tackle the challenge of, it's a fantastic tool, but what value truly, what numbers is it bringing to my organization?
Absolutely. And that's probably one of the most important things, because if you like using a tool, you got to prove that it's actually generating money, right?
Yeah.
So we like to do something called the Valorem Visions board, where we have our guests hop into a whiteboard, if you'll bring that up,
Yeah, sure.
and basically just kind of introduce your idea to the audience, and we'll give you a minute to start cooking. So why don't you go ahead and introduce your topic today?
All right, timer's on. Basically, I'm going to sketch this idea as 3 phases. So first, I'm going to start off on this block. Now, don't be jealous of my artistic skills here, Andrew.
I love pen tools. I love it.
But we've got here, I'm going to call this A for activation. So here we're thinking about, we've rolled out the tool, we're getting some broad exposure, people are starting to learn some of the Copilot basics. And then in the middle, let's go ahead and change our color here. We have got now, this is what I'm going to call activation maturity. So I'll give it an M there. So this is where we actually start to see Copilot usage stick. And then potentially more importantly, where it's not sticking, where people are reverting back to manual processes or not really sort of those time savings. And then finally at the end, let's go for green for money here. We've got the ROI realization. Right? So this, as we think through, is where we narrow actually into specific workflows and really tie some of that usage directly to the business outcomes. What are the goals that the organization has? What are the departmental organizations? Thinking of some of those KPIs as those guiding lights. And then these don't sit just in their own sort of isolated spheres. They all sort of connect to one another. So underneath them, foundationally, I'll put red here, the connecting glue around all of these is this layer of measurement, right? So we need to understand where people are using the tool. And ultimately, what we want to see is, and I'll be realistic, right? We've got some hills of adoption. We've got a couple of plateaus, maybe a dip or so, but we want to see this slow and steady growth throughout by taking snapshots throughout the process to understand usage, sentiment, and ultimately reaching a lovely, I'll put, a little heart here for, we did it, we're here at this organizational point where it's embedded and it has a purpose.
No, that's great. And I think I would go to assume that this is not just as you get Copilot for work, not just the chat, right? As people aren't just asking questions of it, they're actually starting to utilize it in their day-to-day workflow, updating documents, creating agents as you mature through this.
Yeah.
In that complete adoption, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be quite frank, a lot of organizations don't actually get here, right? So they kind of get to this sort of middling place. Ooh, here, I'll draw this. Ooh, oh no, this is the danger zone. So they struggle to sort of get through this adoption maturity where we've got some people using it in their workflows and we've got some champions who are really adopting it and starting to see that value. But across the board, we've got huge gaps between certain departments or certain users even who are seeing that value versus others who are just really sticking in this broad and really shallow adoption in that frame. So a lot of steps to get to this ROI realization, but too often this becomes sort of a pitfall in the middle.
So in your day-to-day, as you work with clients, what are you
Mhm.
seeing as you kind of, you put that red X up there and you're saying most people are kind of living in the, what I'll call it, the superficial adoption, right? Is they're not
Yeah.
using the full use of that tool. What are you seeing in the market right now of how generally people are using, and then maybe how you're working with them to transition into actually using the tools, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So when we start off, just to keep with this frame of mind, when we start off with this activation, these are some of those quick wins that we're seeing. So the aha moments, they summarized 3 hours of Teams meetings into 5 minutes, and that's amazing. But those are all such personal
Mm,
wins and personal tasks, and when they are disparate and throughout the day, they're sort of micro wins that are really hard to measure over time. What we really want to do in this maturity space here, I'll get out of my X so it doesn't seem so bad there. What we do is in this maturity space here is really start to pin down those functional units, those departments, and start actually process mapping what they're doing on a day to day
mm,
level. And so this is really helpful to dig into really small focus groups, run some A B testing, and start to understand the impact of where we can inject Copilot. And I think it's also really important here, too, to understand where we're injecting Copilot really strategically. There's so much out there in terms of broad capabilities. There's so many
mm,
announcements. There's so much focus on the agentic space, right? That
right.
it's really easy to actually try and kind of skip over this and jump straight into the
Mm,
ROI realization without really taking the work within those departments to understand the injection points. Um, and even then, right, even when you do that, there's so much changing with Copilot that you could map out the entire process, and then suddenly there's an update that comes through the line, and then you have to figure out how to go back
right.
and re-inject or edit that from there. So yeah, this is really where really strategic focus groups across departments can help enable that ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we're really talking about, right, is moving from the kind of the chat interface that's really easy, and
Yeah.
you get those really quick wins, right? Like I
Yeah.
remember first getting into Teams and being able to transcribe and give me meeting
Mhm.
notes, and it was like, oh, man, this is saving so much time. But that's really like the lowest hanging fruit of what you can do, and what I hear you saying and what I've also seen in clients is they're not taking that time to really think about the capability of the tool, and actually
Yeah.
how do we challenge what we're doing, and change the work that we're doing because of Copilot, and not just sidecarding it onto our traditional
Yes.
processes, but really making it the core of how we change and do work in the new age of AI and copilots, et cetera.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It is not just here's a tool on top of. It is
Mhm.
Copilot is the new way of working. So if I'm going to fully embed this in the same way we did with things like Teams and Outlook, right? If this is going to be the way in which I communicate, the way in which I deliver work, the way in which I really streamline my processes, it needs to be a foundationally embedded tool, not one that we've just sort of stuck on top of and said, AI is gonna, streamline all of our processes. We really got to think through, okay, how, right? And what are the touch points and where is it most valuable?
So what have you seen from, because everybody wants to get to the big green money box, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're doing a Copilot rollout from
Mm,
adoption to maturity to the ROI, obviously you've got to think about KPIs and ROI and how you're measuring that from the start. So what does that look like, as you move from adoption to maturity? You sit down with focus teams, as you explained,
mhm.
and how do you have the end in sight, but then moving from that adoption to maturity to be able to track those values and KPIs?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm going to bless everyone here with yet another visualization,
Awesome.
and I like to sort of think through that as a funnel as well, right? So if we're starting sort of at the top, we've got this lovely funnel of users, and at the top we're capturing everyone. So here I'm going to put that A again. So that's that activation. Everyone is coming in and getting those quick wins, that we were talking about before. But what I want to call out here is not every single person needs to funnel in to the maturity piece. Right. And if we
Mm,
try to do that, that's, to use one of the great overused phrase here. Otherwise, we would sort of boil the ocean, right? At that
sure.
point, there's so many workflows and processes that if we try to map every single one, we're going to get a little bit lost in the sauce. There's just going to be too much, and there's going to be too much change over the course of a relatively short amount of time. And then even further from that, right, is where we then hone in on I'll add, the green piece here for the ROI realization. Even as we're getting through that, it looks like we're losing, users, but actually at the end of the day, we're just focusing our AI efforts for the most impactful ways to adopt it. So again, I think when we start off here, what we want are things like, we want 100% of our users using Copilot, right? If they've got a license, we want to see them using it frequently. But then we have to identify, what does that 100% look like? Is that they've used it every week? Is it that they've
Mm,
used it every day? Right. So there's sort of micro levels underneath that. From the maturity piece, right, we've got to start to see what is the streamlining of the process, right? So if I think through, let's talk about something like a service desk ticket triage type of situation. If we realize that we are spending, 90 minutes per ticket as it stands, and it needs to be we need to speed it up by 30%. Well, there's our adoption rate, right? 30% increase, or I should say decrease in ticket time. Um,
sure.
you know,
Yes.
and so then that's hyper focused on that sort of specific workflow. Okay, great. So then we start to funnel our KPIs here. And then ultimately this ROI realization has to line up something strategically within the
Mm,
organization. So this has to be some sort of overarching goal. If we, the 100% adoption leads into our IT team is able to reduce their ticket time and spend that time on more impactful work. And then
mhm,
ultimately, what does that mean? And that could mean something as broad as, increasing our work while maintaining a neutral headcount, right? Because the IT team can then, help more people. They can help them accomplish more work, and the organization can work more impactfully without now having to hire more people and sort of maintain that bottom line. So it all sort of funnels into
yep.
that overarching North Star.
Yeah, and I think, as you kind of outline this funnel, right? I think everybody tries to get the ROI off of that activation phase, right? And
Yeah.
immediately everybody, but your companies aren't coming in and really finding what is the strategic business objective that we're
Mhm.
actually, struggling at right now, and distilling that down into a focused effort and using that as the template then to roll out to the different business verticals throughout the company, and then
Mhm.
getting those ROI gains as that. And as you kind of explained it, it sounded like, a lot of companies come in and be like, great, we've got this awesome new tool. We're going to integrate it. We're going to do this. And everybody now just go and try and change the business. And I know from doing workshops and working with your modern work team,
Mhm.
you get lost in the sauce, and then everybody's
Yeah.
like, well, what do we do? What do we actually build, versus having
Mhm.
a first initial focused effort that everybody is all in on a specific department, and then making that the template, and then rubber stamping that across, now
Mhm.
that you have the maturity, the knowledge of how and what the tools can do. And it's tough to stifle off because everybody gets excited, right? And everybody wants to make
Yeah.
improvements to their day.
Yeah, and you mentioned a really good point, right? Like, what are we building as well? I think another potential blocker to seeing that ROI is that everyone really wants to build an agent. But when they
Mm,
are going to build those agents, right? To bring back out my trusty pen here, they're trying to build the agents here. Right. So they activate and then they think, I have all of these solutions. I'm going to build an agent to do that. When 90% of the time, we don't need an agent in that scenario. Or the agent could be something helpful, but we haven't actually gone through this process yet. And we
Mm,
need to go through that business mapping to then develop really impactful enterprise agents or departmental agents to actually start to see that impact there. So if you start injecting your agents in this space, they're all going to be surface level, just like the activation pieces too.
yep,
But once we actually understand the impact, we understand what's going through, we can build out an agent that is reaching the complexity that we need
yep,
to actually then solve our business problems. And then to that point, we can start to achieve, Microsoft's vision of the hybrid workforce where, we've got a human who's got several agents that they're working with to help
absolutely.
accomplish their overall work. But yeah, if we start trying that right away, we're never going to funnel into those results the way we want to.
Yeah, and I think adversely, right? You need
Mhm.
to be able to you need to create that culture that's excited about creating agents and exploring
Mhm.
where I see a lot of people, and you mentioned it, is most of the agents are all very personal, right?
Mm,
And how do I do my day? And what I think is the prohibiting of actually building organizational ROI
mhm.
is identifying those personal agents, and as you said, is how to then do we actually build a really good organizational agent that
Mhm.
solves problems for multiple people. um,
Yeah.
and that kind of gets into, we've had some discussions in the past with other modern work um, folks that start talking about like agent sprawl, right, where
Yeah.
everybody gets in, they're all creating these things, but when you're looking at it from an organizational, are
Mhm.
we actually making money on the actual product that we just invested in? It's really how do we minimize, keep the culture
Mhm.
excited about creating these things and using it, but then taking those examples and making them into organizational wide tools, like what we would
Mhm.
traditionally do with any software, right? Is you're not just building it
Yeah.
for a person, you're building it to accelerate processes throughout the whole organization. So I think that
Mhm.
big blue box, that maturity
Mhm.
box that you have there, is really
Mhm.
that change management between
Mhm.
the personalized to moving it to organizational and transitioning people's thoughts into
Mhm.
how do you do that. But I think the key there is being open and transparent about the ROI metrics, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's what kind of makes the ROI challenge a challenge, as it were, right? Is those,
Mhm.
I would say, aren't typically, and I'd love your perspective on this, is not
Mhm.
being communicated widely of, hey, we're rolling this out. Here is the ROI metric from an organization that we're actually trying to hit, which then
Mhm.
feeds back into everybody else as, well, here's a goal and initiative that I need to be trying to do to hit these metrics.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think a lot of organizations come into the fold to knowing that they want to implement AI and love going to Copilot because we know it is safe and secure and we know it's enterprise ready and it has so many capabilities, but not really establishing what that North Star goal is or not really understanding even themselves, other than they want to be AI forward. But you're totally right that these have to feed into each other because this is an iterative process as we go
Mm,
through the situation too. It's not a sort of a one stop, we activate, we zero in, and we start to see that ROI. We have to continually go through and ensure that we are meeting the goals that we're trying to meet. I like to think of that activation at the top is that's the volume game. That's the
yeah.
making sure everyone can get their hands on it, and then the ROI is all around focus. Um, but it's just to your point earlier about that culture. We
Mm,
want a culture of AI success. We want a culture of sharing that success as well. So some of those stories from those micro savings are really, really helpful, but we also want to highlight some of those big, big impactful pieces as well.
yeah, I think it's easy to measure ROI immediately if you just say, hey, we've got a lot of great stories, right, of
Yeah.
personal uses, as we were just kind of talking about. But really, the ROI that everybody needs to shift their focus on is that
Mhm.
movement to workflows, and how are we measuring workflow return on that investment. Um,
Hmm.
adversely, right? To, hey, I created this cool thing. It's awesome. I saved myself X amount of hours per day, but that may not span organizationally. So
Hmm.
as we think about that, what does ROI actually look like? Let's dive into that a little bit. I think you have a demo that you want to kind of share over. We're going to share kind of our own experience from the from the reply level to kind of
Yeah.
show what that looks like and maybe how we're thinking about it that may help others.
Yeah. So capturing that ROI, there's sort of two sides of the coin. So there's the qualitative and the quantitative. And you need both for Copilot because they feed into each other. But in terms of the quantitative, we do have a couple of ways to measure how people are using Copilot. The one major way that I really like showcasing is all around the insights dashboard or the Copilot dashboard. And so I'll pop that up here. And yes, this is our lovely reply environment. So you can all monitor how well we are adopting our own tools here. But basically, when we come into this space, what this dashboard helps us understand, aside from readiness, which is a great sort of overview of what the tool can do for us, we're also seeing information like adoption, impact, and learning as well. So the dashboard shows us readiness, which is really helpful. It can help us understand based off of how we're working within our organization where some of those easy metrics are to come by, right? So there's this many Teams meeting users, chat users, documents. How can we start to work faster with all of that information? But it's really this adoption and impact that I want to showcase here. So if I hop on over to the adoption piece here, this is going to enable us to view different trends, view how different functions within our organization are actually using Copilot, monitor that over time. This then helps us sort of link and ladder the usage with where we can continue to drive impact. So here we see that we've got the licensed employees and the active users. I'm looking over the past 4 weeks. So again, the scope is a little bit broad here.
Sure.
But down, I can also view by different groups. So if I scroll down, I'll actually view the percentage of active users here. So I can see different app totals based on how people are using these tools. It also helps break it down into the type of activities that they're working on. So the
Mm,
intelligent recap versus am I doing different sort of summaries here? So you kind of get an idea of where people are spending their time and the types of activities that they're doing. I can also look down at agent adoption, which is really great. So as I see here, I can look at who's using researcher, analyst, prompt coach, and sort of see some of those metrics as well, right? If I'm looking at analysts and I see that going down by 11%, that gives me an opportunity to say, hey, that's actually around the time frame that Edit with Copilot came into Excel. So I wouldn't be
mm,
surprised if some updated functionality in one application impacts another. So then I can continue
sure.
sort of monitoring that. What we also really liked about this as well is you can upload insights and information into your database to ensure that you can actually view it by function. The data is only as good as the information uploaded to it. So if people are not
Sure.
segmented, then you can't get down into those segments. But here now I can directly compare the users across different functions or different groups to see maybe where there's people are lagging behind, where people are excelling. And then that also gives me the frame of mind to see, okay, great, I have a particular functional unit. They're struggling in some applications I think they would find valuable. Let's dive in. That's a great opportunity for some A/B testing, some focus group work, because
Hmm.
then you can start to get them to embed it. But you can also see where there's other opportunities that may even exist outside of Copilot. We have the entire Power Platform available to us as well. So there may be some
Yep.
solutions there too. Um, but again, this data is only as good as what's uploaded to it. So that data quality is really important. And we need to make sure that we've got everything organized in Entra to ensure that this is useful for us.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then finally, we also have the impact, right? So as we see here, I've got some, Microsoft math on assisted hours and actions taken, and I can sort of view and see what the value of this is. Now, I wouldn't take this at face value that, we've
Sure.
saved $1 million, right? But to start and understand and say, okay, great, what could that time reinvested look like?
Hmm.
If I had $1 million worth of time, what could I focus on? What projects could I drive? And how can we distribute out
Hmm.
throughout the organization? So this can definitely help us on that quantitative portion.
Absolutely. And I, as we were previously talking, this is all the information that could be then, as we went through that kind of cyclical chart, is being able to
Hmm.
feed that back in, right, to the organization. And whether it's a focused effort like what we saw and being able to gain those insights,
Hmm.
is having this dashboard be able to inform leaders on coaching. Do we need to bring in,
Hmm.
do we need to have some brown bag lunch sessions to help inform people,
Yeah.
get them up and running, and kind of it
Hmm.
all goes back into that adoption change management discussion, right?
Hmm.
It's not just
Yeah.
here's a whole bunch of license, here's what we're going to go do.
Hmm.
If I don't see progress, like, shame on you, like, do better, but actually coming back with intelligible, actionable insights to say, hey, this is where we're struggling, and then
Hmm.
getting not only information from the trenches to feed in of, hey, what are we running into, and then being able to address that and feed that back into the organization to start accelerating, and kind of
Hmm.
month over month or quarter over quarter, half over half, whatever you want to
Hmm.
measure, is making sure that you're getting that adoption, that maturity, that ROI on this investment, and making
Hmm.
sure people are educated, informed on how to use these, and then being um, using the good examples that you do see and saying, hey, this is how people are using
Hmm.
that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to that point of kind of looking through saying, hey, does this functional unit need some sort of lunch and learns or deep
Yep.
dives here within this dashboard? We can look across those trends across groups. And there's some obvious answers here, right? I certainly hope no one was using Copilot on January 1st, right? So we can
Sure.
understand those nuances, but then
Yeah,
to see sort of
absolutely.
where maybe there's some drop off and compare them across those groups. But I will say that this is one component. The qualitative as well is so, so important.
Hmm.
The sentiment around Copilot, the excitement, the growth mindset that comes through as well, that is really going to help us shape this adoption too. People could be completely capable of using Copilot and just sort of not interested because they hit a blocker at one point in time. We want to make sure that people feel empowered to continue exploring, to then bring it right back, right? So if they say, hey, I continued pushing this, I can't get this completed through Copilot as it were, but maybe there's an
Hmm.
agentic solution. Now they're coming
Hmm.
to the business with business solutions, and we're going to continue that sort of cycle of momentum. So, yeah, really important to be able to use these sorts of metrics to understand where people are truly using it, and then drive that adoption.
So I mean, at Reply really comes into
Hmm.
what we've kind of been hinting at, right? Is kind of four areas that we focus on internally to drive this, right? Is that ACM that we talked
Hmm.
about, um,
Uh-huh.
technical readiness, measuring that, and then
Hmm.
doing those workflow deep dives as we're finding success and sharing that knowledge across. And then from business leadership is pulling those out and
Hmm.
saying, hey, this is where this is hitting our metric. This is a good example of what you can do, which then feeds back into the organization. Not to get into,
Hmm.
and I've found myself in this, is like, you can do a lot of stuff with agents. So you get
Hmm.
into these deep black holes of like trying to do things, but is it
Yeah.
actually moving towards a focused effort? And if you have that
Hmm.
cyclical nature, you're kind of shepherding people, right, in your organization into what looks good
Yeah.
and what doesn't, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the important thing to remember about this too is that this is not a 1 month process, right? So I think
Mm,
when people release the licenses, they really want people to jump in and start using it right away. But realistically, this is going to take 4 to 6 months, and that's, I think,
absolutely.
sometimes a hard thing for organizations to understand, that even just when it comes to, this part of it, right? Thinking of adoption to maturity, right? So I want at least double digit weeks to get people really. Ooh, that's a bad 10. I want people to get into the space of using it as a daily behavioral shift. From there, right? I need to spend really like another month to 6 weeks with people to understand those workflow mapping processes. We're spending time really giving people a chance to adopt these behavioral patterns, to make it a part of work, to then truly measure the impact of Copilot, because you can't just put it into one process and say, great, I saved X amount of time.
Yep.
It's about improving and iterating and then continuing to evolve that process. So this is something that does take time, and we want to give people time to do that. But we can start the journey with the activation and then focus it down over the course of a few months to then start to see those ROI benefits.
Yeah, and as I listen to you say that, really what it kind of distills down is actually having multiple ROIs, right? Your short term and long
Mhm.
term goals, and your short term should lead into your long term, but at least you're measuring both, and being
Mhm.
focused on kind of dividing that ROI into two streams, um, and
Mhm.
really voicing the wins from the early easy wins, but also being able to correlate that into the long term journey that may take 4, 6, 8, 12
Mhm.
months, right? As you go. And as AI is, right, and Copilot in
Mhm.
general, it's constantly evolving and changing and growing. So that
Yeah.
target, why it can be 4 to 12 months, is as it goes, you get new functionality, new process that makes
Mhm.
something easier that wasn't able to be done before, and adjusting those and correcting as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're thinking an organization as a whole, right? So all of the different KPIs across functions are all going to feed into each other as well. So keeping that in mind, how we can help support each other throughout that process. To your point, I think it's great to call out that we really need success metrics along the way to
Mhm.
continue to progress toward.
So it's almost flipping after adoption, and activation, it's really actually flipping that funnel almost upside down,
Yeah.
right? And focusing
Yeah.
on what are we trying to achieve from an ROI KPI initiative,
Mm.
and then having that kind of fuel your maturity, as you go,
Mhm.
as you get that adoption and activation metric.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's why we like to call it that North Star, because kind
Yeah.
of no matter where you're looking at it, it is always that guiding light.
Mhm.
And if even if you find that a process isn't working, you can still go back to that activation point. You can go back and say, okay, great. How can we realign to make sure we're tracking back
Yeah.
to where we need to be?
And I'd also probably say, I'd hope you would agree, is also making your ROI metrics achievable and attainable
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
start, right? And not going, as you were kind of joking on like the 100 or the 1.5 million
Yeah.
savings, is not actually trying to do that in your first couple months, right? And going, hey, we have
Hmm.
this new tool, we expect to save this much, but making it more realistic of, it's going to take time to change your organization, change thinking, the way
Hmm.
that we've been doing stuff for 10, 20 years takes time to reprogram, right? In finding these
All
out.
right.
So really actualizing your ROI, probably in your first year, um, to be, as I said, achievable,
Mm-hmm.
to really drive those insights and get that first win in that first year. And then you keep people excited.
Hmm.
And then in that kind of next half year or next year, really start going, okay, now we know how to use this, we're mature, now we'll get these, like, we'll figure out as an organization how to get those big wins
Hmm.
as the tool evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So how do we as we close out here, what would you
Hmm.
the maturity journey is not always easy. What is a way to kind of simplify it a little bit to help people, as we were just explaining, kind of in that first year, to set
Mm,
realistic goals, processes, frameworks?
yeah. So the first thing we need to do is just people enablement, right? So that adoption, that behavioral change. People do need those quick wins.
Mhm.
From there, the people enablement, we can go into those role based scenarios. We dive deeper into the funnel. We understand what they're working on. That leads us directly into those workflows. And those workflows will then map to those departmental KPIs, always keeping those in mind so that we're actually working towards something that the organization wants to see. So the people enablement, role based scenarios, the workflows, and the KPIs are the four key things to keep in mind to actually enable that ROI.
No, that's great.
Mhm.
As you get, and we all know that, as you're measuring these things, it drives focus. Focus then drives behavior, and then that behavior turns into what your ROI actually is,
Yes.
as you go. And so, thank you, Kaitlynn. This was
Mhm.
great. I appreciate all the time and the effort, and I
Mhm.
love seeing what our process is actually doing for clients, because we are actually, while we brought up our own dashboard, I think a lot of the clients and the framework that we're operating in drives a lot of those same dashboards.
Mhm.
And I know your modern work group isn't only about activation, right? We stay
Mhm.
close and help companies guide through that kind of that maturity and focused thinking. I know we do quite a bit of workshops to really get into that focus effort
Mhm.
with companies. And so thanks again, for joining us. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think I just can't emphasize enough that really we can't get to the ROI as well if we don't start with the activation. So if we want Copilot to move beyond just a tool and actually
Mhm.
into that operating model, we really need to start off with that quality activation, because without that early initial excitement and enablement, we're going to be struggling to pick up the pieces throughout. So find your local change manager, have a wonderful training program, and then we can actually start to see those benefits.
Absolutely. And no other better change manager than our wonderful people at Valorem Modern Work. So thanks again. If this connected with you,
Thank you.
and you want more information, um, to go to valoremreply.com. You can hit the connect tab at the
Hmm.
top, and you can get in contact with Kaitlynn and our other modern work specialists to help you through this journey and really drive those ROI, measurements and KPIs, and start hitting them right for your company.
Exactly.
Thanks again, Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Yeah, bye.